All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Care Team Chronicles. My name is Joel. I'm the research coordinator here at the Realm of Caring and also a care specialist as of recently. So you can book an appointment with me if you want to. But today I am very happy to present a very special guest on the show. It is Dr. Ryan Vandrey from Johns Hopkins University. He is the principal investigator of our Observational Research Registry and the published paper that we got in June. And here he is. Hi, Dr. Vandrey.
Hello, Joel. Thanks for having me, dude.
Hey, thanks so much for being with us. It's really great to have you. I should add Professor Vandrey as of recently. I want to throw that in there. Congratulations on your promotion, man.
Appreciate it. I've reached the top rung of the ladder. So nothing to shoot for. Just got to maintain now.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Those of you who don't know what that means, it means that Ryan has worked his tail off for a long time and that he's wicked smart. And so he's an excellent person to have with us on our research project. Today we're just going to dive in and talk about the published paper that we got. But first, I wanted to ask Ryan a couple of questions. So I was wondering what got you interested in cannabis research to begin with?
Well, it's kind of serendipitous more than anything. Wasn't necessarily intentional. I got interested in psychopharmacology as an undergrad, taking a course on that. And so just really the intersection of drugs in the brain. And out of undergrad, I got a job at Hopkins working in a behavioral pharmacology laboratory and worked on studies for every drug except for cannabis and just loved the field. And so when I started looking for opportunities in graduate school, the one that came up happened to be focused on cannabis, working with Alan Budney at the University of Vermont. And I was lucky enough to go get a place with him and studied under him for 5 years. And the rest, as they say, is history. So I kind of got linked in with cannabis right as it was kind of blowing up in the scientific realm with respect to need. And so I've just kind of followed that path.
Yeah, that's awesome. You got in kind of early then on what's now really blossoming field.
Yep. And again, just fortuitous, not really carefully planned.
Well, I'm glad it worked out that way. And that was about 20 years ago?
Yeah, 2000 was when I went to grad school and started studying cannabis.
Okay, fantastic. Wow. So you are definitely one of the foremost experts in the world, dare I say, on this subject. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so this brings us to the research project that you have with the Realm of Caring Foundation, which is dubbed the ORR, the Observational Research Registry. I was not here on the ground floor when this project started. I think this was between Heather and you. I want to hear in your own words how it went down.
Yeah, so again, I like to claim foresight and, brilliant vision and all of that stuff. But the reality of this is that, Heather had gotten started on the ORR before I became involved. And she was actually working with a software team here in Baltimore, collecting data. And I guess just through reputation, I got connected with the guy working with them. And he asked my assistance on writing up a paper, I think in 2016. And through him, I met Heather and we started talking. And I was like, this registry that you have is really something special. You've got access to a really unique patient group here. I see what you're doing. Could we maybe build it out and make it a little bit bigger and a little bit better? And Heather, to her credit, said, absolutely, let's do this. So, in typical Heather Jackson fashion, she came in guns a-blazing, and, all we did was try to offer a little bit of support and a little bit of know-how. And, I think it's really turned into something spectacular.
Yeah, definitely. It was a perfect marriage between the realm of caring and all of the people that we help and all of the data that they're sharing with us, and then academia and professional researchers, and the ability to analyze this data and contribute to the field. It's really been great.
Yep. So, and again, it goes both ways. So, we don't have access to the types of folks that Realm helps and the people that contact you. So, usually when we want to get access or collect data from people, we've got to put ads out and we've got to recruit through the radio or the internet or something like that. You guys already have a really unique um, uh, cohort of individuals who are interested in cannabis as a therapeutic, and it's a group of people that we would never be able to access on our own.
Mm.
So it's wonderful, and I look at this as, we're helping Realm do what Realm does, rather than us really doing much on our own. We're just trying to help the path that Realm was already on.
Hmm. Well, thank you for that. We appreciate your support, and hopefully the medical field will come to appreciate our support even more as we continue to publish papers. Um, so, could you explain what the difference is between an observational study, which is the nature of our ORR, versus a randomized controlled trial, and like what that means in terms of concrete evidence?
Sure. So, I mean, there are very clear, very important differences between an observational study and a controlled clinical trial. So, in an observational study, you're literally just following people and collecting data as they would normally go about their life. So, we are not um, imposing on them what medication to use, how to use it, what dose, or anything along those lines. And so another word for this is a naturalistic study, or natural history study. And so that's what we're doing here with the ORR. We're taking people who are um, contacting Realm and saying, I'm interested in therapeutic use of cannabis, or I'm already using cannabis, but I need guidance on what kind of product to use, how to use it, how much, and things of that nature. And so the value there is that in the absence of kind of a traditionally developed therapeutic that has gone through preclinical studies and human dose evaluations and fine tuning of product formulations, in the cannabis world, there are thousands of products that kind of fit under this umbrella of cannabis that can be used for therapeutic purposes or non-therapeutic purposes. And, so where we're at on the science side of things is we need to understand among these hundreds or thousands of products and the dozens of health conditions that people are using them for, what's working, what's not. We need kind of signals for where to grab and then conduct these placebo-controlled clinical trials. So the advantage of this ORR is that we can capture information from thousands of individuals using hundreds of different products for a variety of health conditions and look for trends in what kinds of products they're using. So is it more a high CBD product or a high THC product? For chronic pain, are they inhaling it versus eating it versus using a topical or some combination? And so we want to kind of see where people are having benefit, where people are reporting adverse events, and trying to identify doses or dose ranges that work for kids versus adults, men versus women, so that we can then be more informed when we start formulating hypotheses and ideas in clinical trials. The limitation of the observational study and why you would still need to do a controlled clinical trial is to control for expectancy effects, and to really fine tune exactly what people are taking to look for ideal formulations, doses, dosing regimens, and things of that nature. So you need to control for expectancy effects. You need to have that kind of placebo control so that you identify, what aspect is due to the medication and the pharmacology versus the experience of taking something for this health condition that you think is going to work.
Right. Yeah. There could be placebo or biases if they're just taking whatever they want on their own and then reporting and not in a controlled environment. So
Yeah.
I see.
And and in a controlled clinical trial, everybody's taking the same thing. Whereas in this case, people are taking a whole variety of different kinds of products. And
Yeah.
so that's good for us to identify similarities across products that seem to be working.
Right. Okay. So the benefit of this observational study is that we can collect a very wide array of information across the board that can possibly give us signals on where to dig in deeper into specific formulations for specific conditions. Is that right?
Exactly. And the reason for this approach is because cannabis has been legislatively approved as a therapeutic rather than developed as a pharmaceutical in this case. So
Mm-hmm.
we're almost reverse engineering everything. We're taking a product that's on the market and trying to understand how it works instead of taking a need, developing a product based on mechanism and bringing it up from the bottom up. We're working from the top down.
Yeah, interesting how it's flipped. We put the cart before the horse a little bit, and with medicinal cannabis. But
Yep.
yeah, so even though our observational study won't tell a doctor exactly how much to give a patient and it won't lead to FDA approval, it's still very important research to get to those endpoints of FDA approved medications.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. And so part of the validity of our observational study is that we're using validated measures in our surveys. And could you explain why that is more beneficial than, say, picking a smiley or a frowny face when you're reporting your symptoms?
Well, so it's important to note that smiley faces can be validated, and they are in some cases. So, what's important is that when you are collecting data in a systematic way from people, that there's a science behind how to do that and how to do that best. And so there's a process by which measures can be validated across individuals to make sure that most of the people reading it are going to understand it and interpret it the right way in the same way. And so when assessments get validated, you have confidence as a researcher that the people reading this are going to read it, interpret it, and answer it the same way. And that when they do it at different times, there's going to be consistency from one time to the next in how they view and interpret and respond to that same question. And so what happens a lot right now in kind of quote unquote observational studies of cannabis, and people have put out apps to track how medical cannabis is impacting people, and if everyone is making up their own version of asking the same outcome, does this help with pain? It's very difficult to be convinced that the assessment of pain is accurate, and to compare it to other research studies that have assessed pain. So one of the reasons why we've wanted to use widely used validated assessments in the ORR is so that we could compare our cohort to other cohorts. And a lot of these validated assessments have cutoffs for clinical significance that we can reference and evaluate. So the perfect example in the ORR is we measure anxiety and depression using a validated assessment that has clinical scores that say, all right, this is a score of 8 and above is concerning from a clinical level, and below 8 is subclinical. And so that becomes an important thing. Our sleep assessment has a clinical cutoff score that says, this is a significant sleep problem. This person has issues with sleep that's clinically concerning. If you just ask somebody, how'd you sleep last night? You can't say that. And you have no way of categorizing the number of people who have these problems in your study. And you also can't look for clinical meaningfulness as well in terms of changes in those scores over time. So what we've been able to do is to say, all right, well, among our cohort, the people that are using medical cannabis are clinically different than people who are not using cannabis. And some of the people who were not using at the beginning and then started to use, we saw clinically meaningful changes in their reports of anxiety, depression, and sleep.
Wow, that's the benefit of having a validated measure, is that it keeps everybody the same across the board. So you're comparing apples to apples, and you're not going off, doing your own thing, which no one would be able to understand or respect, I guess. Excellent. Okay. So let's dig into the paper a little bit. Let's talk about the results that we got.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely very promising. I know it's very early on, and there's a good amount of room for potential bias in the study, but I was very pleased with the outcomes. So basically, we found that across the board, cannabis users report better quality of life, greater health satisfaction, and then slight improvements in a number of health measures. And that was all compared with a control group that was not using cannabis, who reported having better health outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. And so the keys in this study that differentiate it from other things that have been done is that we have a control group. And so our control group was very similar to our cannabis user group. And so that's really important because you have people that are similar across the board on demographics. Our cannabis using group was slightly older than the control group, but that was it. Otherwise, they were matched on race, ethnicity, sex, education, the types of health problems that they had for which they were interested in cannabis. And so when we have these groups that are pretty similar, and the only real difference that we can identify from from our assessments is that one group's using cannabis, the other one isn't, then we can start to trust the differences that we observe between the groups. Is there's a likelihood that cannabis is driving meaningful differences there. And so that's one key aspect of this study. So we've got a control group from which to judge the effect of cannabis. And like you said, we found that pretty much every way we looked at it on key health outcomes where we would think that cannabis would be have an effect, we found that there was better outcomes reported in the cannabis users versus the control group. And even there, you mentioned bias. People right now that take cannabis for medical purposes believe that it's going to help them. They believe that it helps them, whether or not it does. And so it's important to have that control group because there is that inherent bias. The other thing that helped with our study is that we then followed the control group over time, and a pretty large subset of those folks ended up initiating cannabis use later on. And the changes that we saw in them almost perfectly mapped onto the differences between the cannabis users and controls that we saw initially. And so we saw the same magnitude of change on the same outcome measures in those same people, where the only thing that changed was 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and the initiation of cannabis use. And then to flip it, we also saw a minority of people who were using cannabis at the beginning stopped, and they got worse on all of these measures, again, to almost the same degree as we had difference between the users and the controls at baseline. So, we're seeing this really nice interaction where changes in health outcomes were being turned on and turned off by use of cannabis or stopping cannabis.
To me, that sounds significant, but is it really?
So, the significance can be measured a couple different ways, right? So what we're seeing is um, consistency in outcomes based on a manipulation of cannabis use. It's kind of so that gives us confidence that it's the act of using cannabis that is driving some of this.
Mhm.
Again, this is not placebo controlled. It's not controlling for the bias of knowingly ingesting an active cannabis product. There's a variety of cannabis products, and we included people with a whole host of health conditions here. We haven't quite published the data where we drill down on very specific health outcomes or very specific product types yet, but that's coming. But by and large, when we look at the data that we have here, for me as a skeptic scientist going into this, I was like, I wonder if we're going to see anything. I wonder if how much weight it'll hold. I'm convinced, having looked at individual level data as well as the aggregate, that there's something here. It's there. It's clinically significant at the individual level. And what we have are statistically significant, but relatively small changes in a number of these outcomes. But the direction that they go is very consistent. It's showing that predominantly at an aggregate level, people who are using medical cannabis self-report their health being better than when they're not using cannabis. And what we have to understand is that while the magnitude of the numbers between the controls and the cannabis users may look small, in some cases they are clinically significant. And when we take everybody together, it's watered down because there are some health conditions for which pain is not a symptom.
Mhm.
But we still, including them in this model, see a significant difference in pain scores, showing less pain in the cannabis users versus the non-users. So in this, kind of watered down type of analysis, we're seeing at a 50,000 foot level, we're seeing these differences still present, and they're statistically significant, in some cases clinically significant.
Wow. So even though this first paper just took everybody across the board and looked at all the similarities, it didn't take into account different cohorts of different diagnoses or anything like that. This was just how everybody relates with the general categories like quality of life and health satisfaction and such.
Yeah,
So,
and that kind of analysis is really valuable, not for drug development or for determining whether cannabis is helpful for anxiety or ADHD or epilepsy. This first analysis and first paper was really trying to address the question, does legal access to medical cannabis help, harm, or do nothing for the individual patients who are accessing it, right? Because at a fundamental level, we have 33 states in the US that have legalized access to cannabis for medical purposes. And other than Colorado and California, none of them have bothered to follow up to look and see whether or not that was a good thing for their constituents, right? So we wanted to, I think that for me was the very first question that needed to be asked. Are we helping people, hurting people, or having no impact? And this first analysis says on an aggregate level, taking all comers, medical cannabis use seems to be helping people more than hurting them.
yeah, that's what the numbers are telling us. That's exciting, I think, because it matches up with everything we've been hearing at the Realm of Caring for the past 7 years. And, we didn't want to think we were crazy. We just wanted to get some hard data behind that to kind of validate our experiences. And it's really exciting. We know it's initial and there's a lot more data to come and be analyzed, but it's pretty promising so far for for this form of therapy that we think should be explored more and used more for people that can benefit from it. So the conclusion of this first paper was that clinical trials are warranted for defined cannabinoid products for specific health conditions. And I understand we plan on generating a lot more papers from this study. We'll probably do some diagnosis-specific papers.
Yep.
Next.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's the next level of this is, so we've done the 50,000-foot level. Now we need to get down under the clouds and start slicing this data set in different ways. And so we want to look at individual health conditions. We want to look at subgroups in terms of, are there differences between males and females in response? Young adults versus older adults, kids, so there are, there's a lot of nuance to this that becomes really important in terms of us figuring out the path forward. And if we can, help identify areas of great promise, then that's wonderful. And we will try to follow on with clinical trials or encourage others to follow on in clinical trials in those areas. Is at the same time, if we find areas where there just really is no signal of benefit, that's equally important in this day and age, where people are, thankfully in modern medicine, presented with multiple options for treatment for most health conditions. And if we can say that based on our data and looking at 2,000 people, say 300 have condition Y and medical cannabis doesn't seem to be helping them, those people need to know not to try it and to go to something else. At the same time, if we have 500 people with condition Z and we're seeing a really strong, really positive response there, then that's important for people to know. So maybe they'll consider that as a first or second line or an adjunct therapy rather than waiting till the very last resort and where the disease has progressed past the point of return before they start thinking about medical cannabis. So I think we need to look at these from both perspectives, where it's helpful to know where there's promise as well as where there doesn't really seem to be a signal for benefit.
I see, yeah. There's a lot of data that we're collecting that's going to inform a lot of medical decisions. So I'm glad that we're able to do this important work together, help people optimize their health. Well, this was my first opportunity to be a co-author on a published paper, and I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity. I was wondering if you know what number this is for you, if you've just totally lost count.
Let's see. It's around about 100, give or take a few. It depends on where you categorize things. So if you're talking peer-reviewed papers, I think it's in the upper 80s or low 90s. If you count book chapters and other editorial type things, it's a little over 100. So, but that being said, it's not to minimize your accomplishment here, because you're a huge part of the success of this project, and you 100% earned that authorship, Joel.
That's very kind. Thank you, Ryan. I'm just thrilled I got to be a part of this project and help the cause,
Yeah, well, again, this is the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg. We got a lot more to come.
Right, that is exactly true. So I want everyone out there to know that this study is still enrolling. There's no plan for an end in sight. We're just going to keep growing until we have every human on the planet submitting their data to the study. If you want to join, you can visit the realmofcaring.org/ORR. We'll make sure to put the link down in the comments so you can click and join or help publicize the study. Please call or email if you have any questions or want to reach out. I do want to mention that we have a few product companies that have donated coupon codes. So if you do the study at the end, there's options for some incentives. And Dr. Vandrey, guess what?
What?
You just got chronicled.
All right.
All
And
right.
if I can kind of second and follow up on that and encourage everybody to do this, whether you're using cannabis or not, we need controls as well as we need active patients. And, it's relatively easy. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it's incredibly valuable for us and for the providers and the other patients and caregivers to make informed decisions about medical cannabis use. So together we can put a good, solid base of understanding to not be shooting in the dark.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for echoing that. And thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're a very busy guy, a lot going on, so I really appreciate your time and your expertise and your ongoing partnership with the study.
My pleasure. All right, thanks.
All right, thanks so much, Ryan. Take care.
Bye.